I'm going to hit got it. Okay, still trying to figure out this Zoom business. Okay, welcome everyone to History 120. We have a guest speaker today, Dr. Abla Hasan. And let me just give a brief bio of Dr. Hasan here, and then she will go ahead and lecture on the rise of Islam and Muhammad the Prophet. So Dr. Hasan is an associate professor of practice of Arabic languages and culture here at UNL. She got her PhD in the philosophy of language from the University of Nebraska in 2013. Her MA in philosophy as a Fulbright grantee from the University of Nebraska in 2009. Dr. Hasan obtained her BA in philosophy from Damascus University in Syria in the year 2000, followed by a diploma of high school studies from Damascus University in 2001. So quite a teaching background there. She is a native speaker of Arabic. She teaches Arabic language and culture at UNL, and is the program's coordinator. Her teaching and research focus on Quranic studies, Quranic hermeneutics, Islamic feminism, and Arabic studies. She has published extensively with journals like Brill, Analyze, a few other names I can't pronounce, and other peer-reviewed journals. She is author of Decoding the Egalitarianism of the Quran, Retrieving Lost Voices on Gender, on Pain and Suffering, a Quranic perspective, and The Quranic Dilemma, a hermeneutical investigation of, is it Al-Qadir?
Al-Qadir, yep.
Al-Qadir. A teacher, a researcher, a public speaker. In addition to teaching at UNL, Hasan course Women in the Quran, offered to Maryland University, Rutgers University, Penn State University through DICS, and to Nizwa University in Oman through Nebraska's Global Virtual Project. Sorry, the sound here. Dr. Hasan's scholarly engagement includes numerous national and international presentations, including more than 50 invited talks and more than 40 media interviews and citations. So we're very honored to have you speak to our class today. And I will leave the floor to you.
Thank you so much for your kind invitation and for your timely invitation to share some of my research in my coming book, The Quranic Dilemma, which is coming very soon by December 9, hopefully. So today, with my general introduction to Islam as a religion for, or the question, Islam, a religion for our times, I'm going to be sharing some from the new book. So I'm going to be addressing some very basic questions. And I'm going to start by the most basic question: what is Islam? What is Islam? Probably what I'm going to be going to share with you today as an introduction to Islam doesn't fit the expectations. So I have to apologize ahead of time for that. Because in a way or another, we're used, this is the tradition in academia, to switch gears immediately when we're asked about Islam, to start talking about Islam, to start talking about the history of Islam, to put it this way. So to give you a very short introduction about the basics that I'm going to leave immediately, Islam is an Abrahamic monotheistic religion which emerged in a pre-Islamic Arabia in the 7th century. Muhammad, as you probably all know, is the prophet. If you tolerate a theist introduction or language, or the founder, if you prefer, of this religion, if you prefer to use an Orientalist approach. The Quran is the sacred text or the scripture. Now, this is all well known. You can find it in any basic introduction to Islam book, or even better for students, you can Google it. You can now Google these answers while I'm addressing the rest of the presentation. However, instead, let me try a different approach today, more interesting approach maybe. Let me take you inside a less known side of the message of Islam, not as the religion of the other, the exotic other, the unknown other, the misunderstood other, and at times the suspicious other. Instead, let me share with you the core human message of Islam that unfortunately remains unknown to many, including Muslims themselves. Unfortunately today, were more used to think of different religions as mutually exclusive. The historical development of all religions, and Islam is no exception here, magnified a very narrow and exclusivist type of brotherhood in religion. To be a Muslim means nothing but a total disconnect from being a Christian or a Jew, right? I'm not here talking about tolerating the other or working closely with the other, acknowledged in all religions, or even coexisting peacefully with the other. All the projects that, although fully recognized in all religions, unfortunately will still lagging behind. Rather, I'm calling to questioning today the way we formulate and finalize our religious identity, when the I is formed only in contrast with the other. This took place in the history of the actualization of Islam, I would say, as a religion, the way it can be seen in all other religions as well. All came as a natural outcome of the emergence of institutional religions. Authority established in the name of religion meant one thing: a set of privileges to followers and detachment from the rest. Today, we're witnessing a historic moment, though. I don't know how much you agree with me on this. Hopefully, we're going to address that in our discussion. Our modern political secular system is not found on religion. Therefore, we can go back in time now in a more relaxed mood to rethink religions themselves. People in the past couldn't afford doing this. This is exactly what I'll be using today in a reading that reinvestigates the same meaning of Islam from the Quran, what the Quran says about it, beyond the way the expanding Arab empire during the golden ages of Arabs advocated for, solely due to the need to use Islam for mere pragmatic and instrumental ends. So back to the question, what is Islam? What is the core of this religion? Today, in our globalized world, we strive to reach out to the other, to understand each other, to live peacefully with the other. However, probably there is something we can use for our modern day aspiration that our globally shared coexistence turned into a necessity. And I mean by that nothing but religion itself. And I mean by religion, which applies to all religions, as it was first revealed and not before any change took place by political systems indifferent to religion's core message. Back to Islam. Muslims commonly refer to Islam as a universal religion. You hear that a lot. But however, they use this term, many of them, without a full endorsement of the complete image. What does Islam as a universal religion mean? Please join me in reflecting on this question. Why did the Quran invest time in addressing theological Christian debates? Why was Moses mentioned 136 times in the Quran? And to your curiosity, Muhammad was mentioned in name only 4 times. The Quran is addressed to him, but he was mentioned by name only 4 times. Why was Mary, the mother of Jesus, a prophet herself, as I argue, referred in the Quran as the best of all women, all times and all places, and as a role model to Muslim women? Why did the criteria for salvation according to the Quran drop any mention to any specific religion, doctrine, or school of thinking? If you're curious, the salvation criterion along to the Quran includes only 3 conditions. First, to believe in one God. Second, to believe in the hereafter. And third, to do righteous deeds. So none includes a specific reference to one religion, including Islam itself. Now, all these questions and many other questions that our time today won't allow for should at least motivate us to think of Islam as the Quranic Islam as a universal religion that had a cross-cultural message that addresses the best interest of all humans, all times and all places. Muhammad had probably something to say, not only to Muslims and to the Muslim community of his time, but probably to humans. At least this is what we find in the Quran. The Quran confirms this by saying, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. A verse in the Quran in Arabic, which means you've been sent only as a mercy to humanity. Now, thinking forward, striving for diversity, advocating for coexistence, and rethinking God himself as a just deity who can't and who shouldn't adopt favoritism as he approached humanity should probably motivate us to revisit the forgotten message of Islam, a message that the formalization of Islam as an institutional religion didn't stay faithful for. In a nutshell, and before I elaborate on the details, Muhammad probably had a universal message to share, not only with his contemporaries, but with humanity. In this cross-cultural message, Muhammad didn't cancel or abrogate Christianity or Judaism or any of the previous monotheistic revelations, but he addresses both communities with reformations and advice. The same way he addressed the contemporary Muslim community with reformations and advice. Let's not forget as well that even the non-believing other was included in the Quranic holistic plan for coexisting under the general rule, لا إكراه في الدين, which is a verse in the Quran. There is no coercion in religion. So what would the raw version of Islam reveal about this religion? What does the Quran tell us about Islam? Let me share with you the basics today through some simple questions. My first question will be, what is Islam and who are the Muslims? A holistic approach that tries to unlock what Islam stands for in the Quran can help reconcile with the real meaning of Islam, at least as we find in the Quran. Islam, as we find in the Quran, was merely wrongly and unjustly reduced to the meaning of Islam historians and anthropologists adopt today. From the many references in the Quran, it's not difficult to conclude that Islam in the Quran doesn't designate the specific historical movement that Prophet Muhammad began and preached in the pre-Islamic Arabia in the 7th century. Islam, as the Quran confirms, is simply accepting the monotheistic path. So it's accepting the monotheistic path. Excuse me. Which Islam can satisfy, but surely cannot and does not exhaust. Juan Cole beautifully explains, as he says, indeed, the followers of Muhammad in the Quran are called those who have believed, not Muslims. In other words, to be a modern day Muslim or a follower of Muhammad does include, but does not exhaust all ways of being Muslim in the Quranic sense. What about prophets in the Quran? What about the rest of the prophets then? Well, from a pure From a purely Quranic perspective, all prophets and messengers are Muslims, along with their followers. One more affirmation of the, I would say, universal message of Quran. In the Quran, we also read about Abraham and not Muhammad as the forefather and the one who used the term Islam and Muslims for the first time, the one who coined, let's say, this term. In the Quran, submission to God and devotion that is labeled as Islamic is ascribed to many prophets outside of the restricted historical connotation that narrowed down without Quranic authorization what it means to be a Muslim, and treated it simply as synonymous to being a follower of Muhammad. To say it differently, in the Quran, all prophets are Muslims, and all of them conveyed the same one message. Makes more sense, I believe, for a just God who should share his message fairly and equally with all humanity. Now, while this holistic understanding of Islam might sound as undermining the exclusive following of Muhammad as the sound religion and threatens to end the so-called superiority of this specific monotheistic choice, a claim that was historically politicized and intensively used during the times of Arab conquests and imperial expansion. It does not, with no doubt, it help us more to reconcile Islam with its well-rooted universality and inclusiveness, which we find to be problematic in the Quran otherwise. In short, what seems like a Quranic global interfaith community, the term Muslim in the Quranic sense refers to adherents of monotheism and followers of the heavenly revealed guidance with no historical designation of any kind. Let me move to another basic question. What is infidelity or kufr, as the Arabic term is? And who are the infidels? Does the Quran allow violence held in the name of religion? It's important to note that the Quran precisely condemns only those who intentionally deny the religious truth after it was made clear to them. The subtle pinpointing addresses the many difficulties surrounding the way we adopt religious beliefs and narrows down the concept of disbelief, or kufr as the Arabic term, to a very specific category, namely those who denounce religious reality after having recognized it as a reality first. According to the Quranic criterion, unless the agent becomes cognitively aware of religious reality as a reality and then decides to deny it for reasons other than genuine or innocent ignorance, he or she cannot be considered blameworthy. In other words, ironically enough, no one in the Quran becomes a disbeliever before becoming a believer first. Now, understanding infidelity in the Quranic sense should motivate us to refrain from any attempt to think of it as a humanly accessible status or justify accusing someone of being an infidel, as long as it's a divine faculty or ability preserved only for God, who can only know the unseen, and according to the Quran, and can only have an access to what humans conceal. So otherwise, no one can be categorically described as an infidel as long as you can, based on your human conclusions, say that they received the faith as a true faith, and then they decided to turn their back to it. But what if someone announces himself or herself as an atheist or disbeliever? Would such a declaration justify accountability in the name of Islam? Two Quranic observations essential for addressing this question. And these two observations should block any attempt, I would say, to hold anyone accountable, even for their declared rejection of God. First, the epistemic difficulty involved in trying to prove that that subject had already seen the existence of God as a reality and then decided to deny it. Let me give you an example. A faithful scientist who wholeheartedly thinks, based on a lifetime research, let's say, that God does not exist, might not fulfill what is required for someone to be described as an infidel. It's true that he or she will not be described in a sound way as believer, but they won't be described soundly according to the Quran as an infidel or kafir, right? It doesn't qualify to just put them in the opposite category. Second, the general rule that ends once and for all faith-based coercion or violence has been already clearly shared in the Quran, in the verse I just mentioned earlier, in chapter 2, 256, as we read, La ikraha fi ddin, or there is no compulsion in religion. Let me end with a third basic question, and we then move to Q&A and a discussion with you. What does the Quran say about the people of the book, right? We addressed what does the Quran say about Muslims, who are Muslims, and infidels, and then what about people who follow other religions? As I've mentioned, the people of the book and faithful followers of previously divinely revealed scriptures are considered Muslims from a pure Quranic view. In addition, the people of the book are included in the Quranic plan for salvation. As we read in chapter 2, 62, the Muslim believers, and I'm quoting from Quran, the Muslim believers, the Jews, the Christians, and the Sabians, all those who believe in God and the last day and do good will have their rewards with their Lord. No fear for them, nor will they grieve. Quran 2:62. Criticizing heresies and violations that the Quran launched, with no doubt, against the Muslim community and the people of the book alike is an affirmation, probably, of the validity of the previous Judeo-Christian heritage. The purification of the divine message and the assurance of the continuity of the divine human communication are tasks that are repeatedly assured in the Quran. The Prophet, as the Quran mentions, was not assigned the duty of conveying a new revelation as much as he was given the responsibility of confirming and purifying the previously revealed message. And instead of the tortuous argument for a contradiction or even for an evolvement in the way the Quran approached the existing Judeo-Christian scriptural heritage, a holistic approach that unites the Quran with its universal message can reconcile Quranic passages that endorse the Judeo-Christian heritage with the heavy Quranic criticism of violations among Muslims, Christians, and Jews alike. To sum up, then, when Muhammad approached his contemporary and his possible future Jewish and Christian community, he approached all of them as a reformer, a teacher, and as an educator, the same way he did with his Muslim audience. Let me end with this. So today, it's necessary for scholars and practitioners in conflict resolution and peace studies to understand and work with tools we need in this mission. Rethinking religions instead of abandoning them, a project that has never been proven to be practical, to say the least, might be the way to go. The Quran never announced the abrogation of previous monotheistic revelations as its goal. Prophet Muhammad was precisely and meaningfully identified as a reminder, as we read in Quran 88, 21, 22. So Prophet, remind them, your only task is to remind. You're not there to control them. Let me end with this reminder of Muhammad as a teacher who probably had something to share to unite humanity, and with another reminder of religions as divinely revealed, but as humanly practiced. And between the divine revelation and the human actualization, I would say, between both ends, the core message seems to have been lost. Finally, let me end by another reminder of the need to prioritize a question that we can't afford asking today, a question that goes beyond the artificial, human-made otherness to investigate the pure divine oneness in God as one human community. Maybe we can realize then that Islam, like all other religions, had something to say to our times. Let me stop here for questions from you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hasan. Very interesting, eloquent talk. So I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to our class. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you well, and I apologize for the noise. Do you hear the noise like in the office next to me? If it's okay with you, that's fine.
Let's say your voice comes through much clearer than that noise, so.
Awesome.
Well, I want to open it to question and answer. And so maybe I'll just start and kind of set the pace for question and answer. So I was a student of Dr. Hasan. It's been a little while, maybe 2018, I want to say, spring of 2018. And I took a class on Islamic feminism, or at least like, you know, the Quran in relation to gender. And a lot of people, of course, have kind of stereotypical notions of what the Quran says about women. And then you go through the text itself and you're like, oh, wow, you know, it's not what I thought it was, you know? So I guess my question is how do, in liberal democracies in Western Europe and the United States, this issue of women and hijab, which is kind of the head covering, like what does the Quran say about hijab, and how do Muslim or women who identify with Islamic feminism, what do they have to say about head coverings, hijab, and things like that? I thought I'd just go right for the hot button issue. So
thank you for your question. Would you mind if I share a secret, your Arabic name that you picked for my class with your students?
Absolutely.
So Tim, it's the tradition in the Arabic program to go with Arabic names. It's optional. And Tim went with Hakim, which means wise, a very beautiful name. And I still remember this. And when I see him in the hallways here at UNL, I still call him Hakim. So it was an honor to have you join my class, Women in the Quran. And my first book was based on inspiring questions from students, decoding the egalitarianism of the Quran. And the question on women's status in the Quran, I take it as a theological question par excellence. Theological question. It's not merely a question because our modern day, where women are treated equally to men, or this is the aspiration, the ideal condition. Now we want to go backwards in time and ask about what does the Quran or the previous scriptures say about that. And why is it a theological question? Because it's addressing God himself. So how can we worship God or a God or a deity who's not just to men and women, who can favor men to women? Unfortunately, the actualization of many religions ended up with saying, this is what you have with the scripture, deal with it. So as a Muslim feminist, and this is a project I believe we share with a lot of Christian and Jewish feminists and Muslim feminists, is the project of going back to the scripture itself, right? So when you want to tell me, this is the full package, right? This is religion. Either you take it or you leave it. I know that many took the route of becoming secular feminists and getting out of the whole system, right? I still find no, the problem is not in the scripture itself, right? The problem is the way it was processed under the authority of patriarchy, right? And it comes even with good intentions. The complete absence of female voices, exegetical voices, meant one thing: an interpretation of the text that was not just or fair to the best interest of women. It's natural. Even with the best interest of male exegetes, they're gonna still use a masculine and patriarchal lens to access the text, right? So when you go back to the text, you find that the text is, I won't say gender egalitarian, I will say it's a pro-women, pro-women. I can speak about the Quran, which is my main topic of research, because the Quran prioritizes the needs of the less advantaged, right? In any community, in any society. The reminders, the continuous reminders of treating in a good way or a kindly to the elderly, okay? The orphans, countless reminders, right? And the women as a less advantaged, let's say, sub-social category, right? We read in the Quran about, as I mentioned briefly, and this is a big question, we read about full equality on the top level by arguing for Mary, not only as the mother of Jesus, but as a prophet herself. And why is it important to go, which is acknowledged in the Quran, yet less acknowledged as you can anticipate or even expect in the history of Islamic jurisprudence? It was acknowledged by some like Ibn Hazm al-Andalusi, who clearly argued for Mary as a prophet, but it remains the minority opinion here. Because if women can share men the ultimate rank of human perfection, this means there is nothing inferior of the nature of women themselves that could prevent them from becoming prophets. So it's a big, again, theological question that we need to ask to make sense of the religion itself. Otherwise, I can't accept a God who favors men to women. Simply, I can't accept to worship that God. And none of the previous scriptures advocated for such a God, but I believe humans did. Humans did. Another point you mentioned was veiling, and arguing for hijab. It's clearly mentioned in the Quran, hijab as a recommended style of modesty. Again, it's the right to treating your body, right, the way you want. But I can also assure that it's based on free choice. And this doesn't, so forced hijab is not hijab, okay? This is based on understanding all the rest of rituals and religious duties. You can't get simply any merit for anything if it's forced on you, right? And hijab is no exception. It's clearly said in the Quran that hijab is based on a full choice made by women to be distinguished by Muslim women, and to avoid, it's a big topic. Maybe I won't be fully understood if I just summarize it in an answer to question, because I have a full chapter in my book on hijab. But again, it's based on the desire to be recognized as a Muslim woman and to avoid, not harassment, please, this is another misunderstanding, that women who don't wear hijab deserve to be abused or sexually harassed. No, just it's giving a visual image of your high expectations in dating, in relations, in the future couple, maybe in the future husband or future partner. It's a visual, I would say, demarcation that can only complement the behavioral announcing of yourself, and the rest of the way you live your life. Again, it's a choice recommended for Muslim women, but it's based on freedom, like everything else. I remember in a class discussion, we were discussing forced veiling, which you find in some countries, and forced unveiling, which you find in other countries. I've witnessed some of that. Forced unveiling. And I learned a lot from my students, and I remember asking my class, what's better, forced veiling or what's worse, forced veiling or forced unveiling? And the student told me, force anything, right? You can't force anything on a human being and then advocate for it as a religious duty. And with this, I hope I addressed your question, but I can say more if you prefer, or maybe we move to other questions from students.
Thank you so much.
If interested, it's in decoding the egalitarianism of the Quran. And I'm just teaching Women in the Quran by the Spring, by the way, which I teach this book as one of the textbooks there.
You hear that? Better sign up. Does anyone have a question they would like to ask? Anyone? For brownie points. I might ask another question too, but I don't want to be the only one asking questions. We have a lot of, I don't know to what extent this class has identified at all with Islam, or have known many people who identify as Muslim, but I suspect a lot of people come from kind of Judeo-Christian or Christian backgrounds, nominally at least. So how would you say this class is they're knowledgeable now, monotheism, Judaism, Christianity, and now we're starting to delve into Islam. So how would you, in a nutshell, how would Muslims view Jesus, the person, Mary, Jesus in relation to Muhammad, and then Jesus in this long line of monotheism? In other words, who is the identity of Jesus for a devout Muslim? Because as Muslims take Jesus very seriously, but the understanding might be a little different than an Orthodox Christian and then a Jewish understanding.
Thank you for your question. I'm going to address your question, and then I'm going to move to disconnecting the recording, my favorite trick, and you will see we're going to have more questions from students. So after answering this question from you, maybe I'll do that. A very important question: who is Jesus in Islam? As I said in my introduction, all prophets are considered prophets, human beings, right? They're considered Muslims because there is a chain of prophets conveying the same message. What is the core of Islam? It's radical monotheism. It's believing in one God. Whether you choose to worship the one God through Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, or any monotheistic religion, it's your choice, as long as you don't mess up with the core of monotheism. Jesus is considered also as a miracle. So the story of the virgin birth of Mary is acknowledged in the Quran. He is described in the Quran as God's own word. The same way the Quran is described as God's own word. So he's a miracle. He was able, a lot of the miracles mentioned in the Bible are acknowledged in the Quran as well. So Jesus was able to heal the sick, was able to bring the dead to life, but by permission from God. So speaking about any level of special divinity to Jesus won't be described as fitting the radical monotheism, which is it's only one God, right? But is he divine? He's divine the way we're all divine, because I argue for divinity of all human beings. It dates back to the story of creation itself, when the biblical / Quranic story, when God created Adam and breathed from his own soul into him to send him on earth as a vicegerent, as a deputy, to make him divine. So we're all divine. And probably Jesus is still divine, but not in an exceptional way, according to Muslims, because even the miracles he worked, that was done by permission from God. It's interesting that Mary is mentioned as well as a human being. It is stressed in the Quran by referring to the simple facts. Both of them used to eat food, something as simple as that, to urge believers to reflect on their humanity, their full humanity. And with this, I'm going to stop recording, because I feel the audience is a little bit shy. And like all my other talks, I'm sure we're going to have more questions. Sounds good to you, Tim?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I'm posing very